The gravel crunched a soft warning beneath Ilara's tires as she rounded the final bend. And then, through a sudden parting in the ancient oak canopy, it appeared. Blackwood Manor. It wasn't quite as she'd imagined from the faded photographs and the hushed tones of the estate agent. More imposing, certainly, but also imbued with a wild, untamed beauty that spoke of centuries weathering the elements. A grand dame, cloaked in ivy, nestled deep within a sprawling landscape of rolling hills and distant, glinting sea. The sky, a bruised purple, threatened rain, and a fresh, briny scent, mingled with damp earth and wood smoke, promised an evening of cozy solitude or something far more expansive. She killed the engine, the sudden silence vast and profound, broken only by the whisper of the wind through the trees, and the distant cry of a gull. Her breath hitched, a small, involuntary gasp. This was more than just another project. This was a place with a soul, a story etched into every weathered stone. And it was here, in this remote corner of the world, that she was meant to bring it back to life. Unlocking the car door, Ilara stepped out into the crisp autumn air, pulling her cashmere wrap tighter around her shoulders. The chill invigorated her, stirring a familiar thrill of anticipation. She was an artist after all, her canvas the very bones of a home. But Blackwood felt different. It hummed with a quiet energy, an invitation to delve deeper than mere aesthetics. A figure emerged from the shadows of the large oak beside the front entrance, tall and lean, silhouetted against the deepening twilight. He moved with an unhurried grace that was instantly captivating. Reese. She'd only spoken to him on the phone, his voice a low, resonant rumble that had somehow managed to permeate the professional veneer of their conversations. He was the reason she'd taken this commission, despite the daunting scope and the distance from her city-bound life. A fleeting glimpse of a photo had sealed it. His eyes, dark and intense, promising depths she hadn't dared to explore. Ilara. His voice in person was even richer than she'd remembered, a warm vibration that seemed to settle deep in her chest. He stepped into the fading light, and her breath hitched again, this time with a sharp, undeniable awareness. He was more striking than the photograph, a rugged handsomeness, sculpted by sharp angles, and a hint of something untamed in his gaze. Dark hair, slightly disheveled by the wind, framed a face that was both intelligent and subtly shadowed, as if carrying the weight of untold stories. His eyes, the color of aged whiskey, met hers directly, and for a long moment, the world outside the two of them ceased to exist. "Reese," she managed, her own voice a little breathy, a little softer than she'd intended. A faint smile, slow and sensuous, touched his lips, crinkling the corners of his eyes. It was a smile that didn't quite reach them, hinting at a quiet intensity that intrigued her profoundly. "Welcome to Blackwood Manor," he said, extending a hand. His touch was firm, warm, and sent a jolt of something electric up her arm. It lingered for a fraction of a second longer than strictly necessary, a silent acknowledgement of the current that had sparked between them. "It breathtaking," she replied, pulling her hand away reluctantly, feeling the ghost of his touch on her skin. She gestured vaguely at the house, her gaze sweeping over its grand facade. "The photographs truly don't do it justice." "No, we rarely do with Blackwood," he agreed, his eyes following hers, a shared appreciation passing between them. "Come inside. The weather looks set to break, and I imagine you've had a long journey." He led the way, his stride long and purposeful. Ilara followed, her senses already overwhelmed. The massive oak door, studded with iron, creaked open to reveal an interior that was both grand and surprisingly welcoming. The air inside was cool, carrying the scent of old wood, beeswax, and something else. Something uniquely Blackwood, perhaps a hint of latent magic. The entrance hall was cavernous, with a sweeping staircase that ascended into the shadows. Sunlight, now thin and watery, filtered through a stained glass window high above, casting jewel-toned patterns on the flagstone floor. Despite the scale, there was an immediate sense of history, of lives lived and stories whispered within these walls. "I've lit a fire in the library," Rhys said, his voice soft to hear, a natural companion to the hushed grandeur. "And I hope you don't mind, I took the liberty of putting your bags in the rose room. It has the best view of the gardens, and the sea beyond." "That's very thoughtful of you," Elara replied, a small flutter starting in her stomach. The rose room. The name alone conjured images of delicate beauty and soft intimacy. She imagined him carrying her luggage up the grand staircase, his presence filling the quiet rooms. He led her through a series of wide archways, past rooms draped in dust sheets, until they reached a magnificent double door. He pushed it open, revealing a sanctuary of warmth and light. The library. Walls lined with ancient tomes, their leather spines worn smooth with time. A vast Persian rug in muted jewel tones covered the floor. But it was the fireplace that drew her eye, a roaring blaze banishing the chill, casting a golden glow on the room. Two deep leather armchairs flanked the hearth, inviting repose. "Please, make yourself comfortable," Rhys gestured to one of the chairs. "I'll get you something warm to drink. Tea, coffee, or perhaps something a little stronger after your drive." "Tea would be lovely, thank you," she said, sinking into the plush embrace of the armchair. The leather was soft and yielding, smelling faintly of old books and pipe tobacco, a comforting masculine scent. She watched him move, his movements fluid and economical, as he walked towards a small antique drinks cabinet in the corner of the room. The firelight played over his dark clothes, highlighting the subtle ripple of muscle beneath the fabric. He was a man accustomed to his own space, comfortable in his own skin, and utterly at ease in this grand, silent house. He returned shortly with a steaming mug of Earl Grey, the fragrant steam curling delicately into the air. He placed it on a small, intricately carved side table beside her, his fingers brushing hers as he withdrew his hand. Another jolt, softer this time, but no less potent. He then settled into the opposite armchair, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. "Whiskey," she presumed. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the gentle ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall. Elara savored the warmth of the mug in her hands, letting the quiet solitude of the room wash over her. It was a rare luxury, this stillness, a world away from the constant hum of her city apartment. "So," Rhys began, his voice a low murmur breaking the spell, "what are your initial impressions of Blackwood now that you've seen it firsthand?" Elara took a sip of her tea, letting the warmth spread through her. "It's magnificent, Rhys, truly. But it also feels a little lost, like it's waiting for someone to remember it." He watched her intently, his whiskey eyes reflecting the firelight. "Lost is a good word. It's been in my family for generations, but it's been some time since it was truly lived in. My grandmother passed a few years ago, and since then, it's been quiet." A subtle wistfulness touched his tone. "I want to bring it back to life, to its former glory. But with a touch of modern comfort, of course. Without losing its soul." "Exactly." Elara nodded, feeling a surge of professional excitement. This was precisely the kind of challenge she thrived on. "That's what I envisioned too. Preserving the history, honoring the craftsmanship, but infusing it with a fresh energy, making it a home again, not just a museum." Their conversation flowed easily, effortlessly, from architectural styles to historical periods, from color palettes to fabric textures. They found common ground in their aesthetic sensibilities, a shared vision for Blackwood that transcended mere client-designer dynamics. It was more like two artists collaborating, their ideas weaving together, sparked by mutual respect and a growing unspoken current of attraction. As the light outside faded completely, giving way to a velvet darkness, punctuated by the first drops of rain, drumming softly against the window panes, Rhys rose. "You must be hungry. I've prepared something simple, nothing too grand but hopefully comforting after your journey." "You cook?" Elara asked, surprised, and a little delighted. He offered that slow, enigmatic smile again. "When necessary, and tonight it's necessary." He led her through a labyrinth of hallways, dimly lit by sconces that cast long dancing shadows, until they reached a less formal dining room. It was smaller than the grand banquet hall she'd glimpsed earlier, but no less elegant. A long, polished mahogany table was set for two, gleaming beneath the soft glow of a crystal chandelier. A single flickering candle in the center cast a warm, intimate light. The rain outside had intensified, a steady rhythmic drumming that lent a cozy intimacy to the room. Rhys pulled out her chair for her, and as she sat, his hand brushed the small of her back, a brief fleeting touch that sent a shiver through her. She tried to tell herself it was just the chill of the old house, but her skin buzzed with a different kind of awareness. He served a rich, fragrant lamb stew, accompanied by crusty bread and a bottle of deep red wine. The food was simple, hearty, and utterly delicious. The wine, a robust Cabernet Sauvignon, warmed her from the inside out, loosening the last vestiges of her travel fatigue. "This is wonderful, Rhys," she murmured, after a particularly satisfying bite. "You truly are full of surprises." He chuckled. A low, pleasant sound. "Blackwood demands a certain self-sufficiency, and I enjoy the quiet rhythm of it, away from the city." They talked about their lives, about their passions. Ilara spoke of her love for design, the challenge of transforming spaces, the satisfaction of creating beauty. Rhys in turn spoke of his work in conservation, of his family history intertwined with the land, of his deep connection to Blackwood. He was a man of quiet intelligence, his words carefully chosen, each one carrying weight. She found herself captivated, drawn in by the depth of his thoughts, the intensity of his gaze. The wine, the fire, the rain outside, it all conspired to create an atmosphere of delicious intimacy. She found herself leaning forward, eager to catch every word, every nuance of his expression. His eyes in the candlelight seemed to hold a flicker of something raw and powerful, a hunger that mirrored her own, carefully suppressed desires. As the meal wound down and the last of the wine was poured, a comfortable silence settled between them once more. The rain continued its steady patter, a lullaby against the windows. "I should let you get some rest," Rhys said finally, his voice a little huskier now, as if the shared warmth of the evening had softened the edges of his formality. "It's been a long day." Ilara felt a pang of reluctance. She didn't want the evening to end, not yet. Not when the air between them felt so charged, so full of unspoken possibility. But she nodded, acknowledging the truth in his words. He walked her back through the darkened hallways, the soft glow of the sconces illuminating their path. The house felt different now, less daunting, more familiar, as if her presence had already started to awaken it. As they ascended the grand staircase, the shadows danced around them, creating a sense of private enclosure. "The Rose Room," Rhys announced softly, stopping before a door at the end of a quiet corridor. He opened it, revealing a large, airy room bathed in the soft ethereal light of the moon, which had now broken through the clouds. The room was beautiful. A magnificent four-poster bed, draped in sheer fabric, dominated the space. A delicate aroma of dried roses lingered in the air. A small fire crackled in a hearth across from the bed, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Through the large bay window, she could see the glimmering expanse of the sea, silver under the moonlight, and the dark silhouettes of the gardens. "It's perfect, Rhys," she whispered, genuinely moved. The room was more than just a guest room. It was a sanctuary. He stepped into the room, walking towards the window, his back to her. "I thought you might appreciate the view." His voice was low, almost a murmur. "It's especially beautiful when the moon is full." Ilara followed him, drawn by the magnetism of his presence. She stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder, gazing out at the moonlit landscape. The sheer proximity was intoxicating, a silent language passing between them. She could feel the warmth radiating from his body, the subtle scent of him, wood smoke, whiskey, and something else, something uniquely masculine and utterly compelling. The rain had stopped, leaving the world outside sparkling and fresh. A gentle breeze stirred the curtains, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and sea salt. The silence stretched, potent and alive, filled with the unspoken questions and desires that simmered beneath the surface. She turned her head slightly, her gaze drawn to his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the curve of his lips, the intensity in his eyes as he looked out at the sea. He seemed to sense her gaze, slowly turning his head to meet her eyes. The air crackled. His eyes, dark and deep, held hers captive. In their depths, she saw a reflection of her own longing, a raw, undeniable hunger. The world narrowed to just the two of them, bathed in moonlight and firelight, the vast, ancient house holding its breath around them. He raised a hand, slowly, deliberately, and she felt her own breath catch. His fingers, long and strong, brushed against her cheek, a feather-light touch that sent shivers through her entire body. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, a tender caress that spoke volumes. Her skin tingled, alive under his touch, craving more. "Elara," he murmured, his voice a low, husky whisper, barely audible above the crackle of the fire. The sound of her name on his lips was an intimate caress, a promise. He leaned closer, his gaze dropping to her lips, then back to her eyes, seeking permission, offering an unspoken invitation. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the quiet room. Every cell in her body screamed for him, for the taste of him, for the release of this exquisite tension that had been building between them all evening. She met his gaze, her own eyes wide and vulnerable, silently echoing his desire. He closed the small distance between them, his body a warm, solid presence against hers. His other hand came up, gently cupping the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in the soft strands of her hair. He tilted her head back slightly, and her lips parted on a soft sigh. His breath, warm and tasting faintly of whiskey, ghosted across her mouth. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy with anticipation. She could feel the delicate stubble on his jaw as he drew nearer, the subtle friction a delicious torment. Just before their lips met, she caught a glimpse of the fierce hunger in his eyes, a mirroring of the wild desire that now raged within her. And then, his lips were on hers. It was a soft, tentative touch at first, a question more than a demand. A gentle press, a testing of the waters. But even that tentative contact sent a shockwave through her, igniting a fire that had been smoldering all evening. She responded instantly, her own lips parting further, inviting him in. He took the invitation, deepening the kiss slowly, deliberately. His mouth was warm and soft, then firm, coaxing, exploring. She felt herself melt into him, her hands rising to grip the lapels of his jacket, holding on as if to anchor herself in the swirling current of sensation. The kiss grew in intensity, a slow burn that quickly flared into an inferno. His tongue traced the seam of her lips, a tantalizing prelude, and when she granted him entry, he explored the soft recesses of her mouth, with a tender thoroughness that left her breathless. It was a kiss that spoke of longing, of discovery, of a connection that felt both ancient and brand new. She tasted wine and warmth and something uniquely rice. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them, her body pressed flush against his. She could feel the hard planes of his chest, the tautness of his stomach, the undeniable evidence of his arousal pressing against her. A soft moan escaped her lips, lost in the depth of his kiss. Her fingers tightened on his jacket, then moved to tangle in the soft hair at the nape of his neck, pulling him closer still. She wanted to drown in him, to lose herself in this intoxicating embrace. Every nerve ending in her body was alive, humming with a desperate need. He broke the kiss reluctantly, pulling back just enough for their foreheads to touch, their breaths mingling in the silent room. His eyes, dark and heavy-lidded, gazed down at her, filled with a raw emotion that stole her voice. His thumb continued to stroke her cheek, a tender counterpoint to the wild passion that still thrummed between them. "Elara," he whispered again, his voice rough with desire, his lips still swollen from their kiss. I shouldn't have." Her heart plummeted, a sudden cold splash in the fiery warmth. A flicker of doubt, of fear, crossed her mind. Had she misread him? Had she gone too far? But then his eyes, though clouded with a hint of regret, still held that fierce hunger, that undeniable longing. He didn't release her, his arms still tight around her waist, holding her close, as if he couldn't bear to let her go. "But I'm glad, Id," he added, his voice barely audible, a confession whispered into the quiet intimacy of the rose room. He leaned in again, pressing a soft kiss to her temple, then her cheek, then the corner of her mouth, each touch a tender reassurance. "Good night, Ilara." He pulled back, slowly, reluctantly, his hands lingering on her waist for a moment longer, before finally releasing her. The sudden absence of his touch left her feeling cold, bereft, yet still burning from within. He stepped back, a small distance now separating them, but the invisible thread that bound them was still taut, vibrating with the echoes of their kiss. He gave her one last intense look, a silent promise in his eyes, before turning and leaving the room, closing the door softly behind him. Ilara stood there, frozen, her heart still pounding, her lips still tingling, her body still humming with unfulfilled desire. The scent of him lingered in the air, a potent reminder of what had just transpired. She touched her fingers to her lips, reliving the exquisite sensation of his mouth on hers. She walked slowly to the bay window, gazing out at the moonlit sea, its waves crashing softly against the distant shore. The night was vast, silent, and full of unanswered questions. What had just happened? What did it mean? And what would tomorrow bring in the quiet, ancient walls of Blackwood Manor? She knew one thing for certain. Her arrival at Blackwood had ignited something far more profound than a professional challenge. It had stirred a long dormant part of her soul, a yearning for connection, for passion, for a love that felt as deep and timeless as the ancient house itself. And Rhys, with his quiet intensity and his devastating kiss, was at the heart of it. Sleep, she suspected, would be a long time coming. The whispers of the manor, and the whispers of her own awakened heart, would keep her company through the long moonlit night. The moon, a silent sentinel, cast long spectral shadows across the intricate patterns of her wallpaper. Evelyn lay utterly still, her eyes wide open, tracing the dance of light and dark. Sleep, indeed, was a distant shore she couldn't hope to reach. Rhys's kiss had been an earthquake, shattering the carefully constructed dam around her heart, and now a torrent of sensation, memory, and yearning rushed through her. His lips, the unexpected softness, the underlying strength, the scent of him, earth, old wood, and something uniquely masculine, vital. The way his hand had cupped her jaw, a tender possessiveness that had sent a shiver, both exquisite and unsettling, down her spine. It wasn't just the physical act, it was the raw, unguarded emotion in his eyes, a depth of feeling that mirrored the sudden, startling vulnerability in her own. Evelyn, the meticulous historian, the woman who lived by facts and quantifiable data, was adrift in a sea of pure, unadulterated feeling. Her professional life, her entire identity, was built on control, on objective analysis. She prided herself on her composure, her ability to remain detached, even in the face of the most fascinating discoveries. But Rhys Blackwood had walked into her carefully curated world, and with a single touch, had set it ablaze. She thought of her past, a series of relationships that had always felt polite, pleasant, never this consuming, this utterly disarming. She'd always retreated from intensity, perhaps fearing its power to overwhelm. But now, in the stillness of this ancient room, she felt a strange pull towards it, a dangerous magnetism she couldn't deny. The manor itself seemed to hum with this new energy, the whispers no longer just the rustle of old secrets, but the murmur of possibility, of unspoken desire. Was this what the house had been waiting for? Was it pulling them together? Two solitary souls, to breathe new life into its silent halls? The idea, though fantastical, resonated with a strange truth. She felt an undeniable connection to Blackwood Manor, a sense of belonging she hadn't anticipated. And Rhys, the quiet guardian of its history, was intrinsically woven into that feeling. He was as much a part of the house as the ancient stones and the winding ivy. A sigh escaped her lips, a soft whisper into the darkness. She was terrified, yes, but also undeniably thrilled. The fear was of losing control, of surrendering to a passion that felt too vast, too powerful. The thrill was the promise of it, the intoxicating taste of a life she hadn't known she craved. She closed her eyes, but his image was burned behind her eyelids. The dark intensity of his gaze, the slight stubble along his jaw, the way his hair fell across his forehead. He was an enigma, a challenge, and a temptation she suddenly found herself unwilling to resist. The night stretched on, long and luminous, filled with the echo of a kiss, and the thrilling, terrifying beat of her own awakened heart. The first rays of dawn, hesitant and pale, finally pierced through the heavy velvet curtains, painting the room in soft hues of grey and rose. Evelyn had eventually succumbed to a restless sleep, her dreams a tangled tapestry of Rice's presence, the manor's secrets, and a burgeoning unfamiliar longing. She woke with a start, her heart thrumming, the memory of his kiss as vivid as if it had just happened. A quick glance at the clock told her it was later than she usually rose. She sprang from the bed, a nervous energy propelling her. The professional facade, the calm, collected Evelyn, needed to be firmly back in place before she faced him again. She chose a simple tailored dress, forest green, to complement her eyes. She thought absently, and brushed her hair into a neat, professional chignon. Every movement was deliberate, an attempt to anchor herself in the familiar rhythms of her routine, to quell the tremor of anticipation that still vibrated beneath her skin. Downstairs, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, and something savory, bacon perhaps, wafted from the kitchen. She found Reese at the long dining table, bathed in the soft morning light, filtering through the tall windows. He was already seated, a steaming mug cradled in his hands, his gaze fixed on the intricate carving of the table's leg. He wore a dark, open-collared shirt that emphasized the strong line of his neck and shoulders, and his hair, still slightly damp, gleamed with hints of copper in the sun. He looked up as she entered, and their eyes met across the vast expanse of the table. For a fleeting second, the air crackled with an unspoken acknowledgement of the night before, a raw, almost breathless tension. Then, he offered a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a faint flush rising on his cheekbones. "Morning, Evelyn." His voice was a low rumble, perhaps a touch rougher than usual. "Good evening, Rice," she replied. Her voice, she noted with relief, was steady. She walked to the sideboard, pouring herself a cup of coffee, her hands steady despite the internal flutter. "Slept well?" The question was out before she could censor it, a foolish, loaded query. He took a slow sip of his coffee. "Well enough," he said, his gaze briefly meeting hers before dropping to the swirling patterns in his mug. "You?" "The same," she lied smoothly, taking a seat opposite him. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with the weight of what had transpired. It was both awkward and intensely intimate. Every rustle of her dress, every clink of her spoon against her mug, seemed amplified. Finally, Reese cleared his throat. "I was thinking," he began, his voice regaining its usual calm authority. "We should focus on the library today. It's one of the oldest parts of the house, and I suspect many of the family records, perhaps even personal correspondence, are stored there. It could shed light on the manor's architectural evolution, as well as its spiritual history." It was a professional suggestion, designed to steer them back to safe ground, and Evelyn grasped it gratefully. "An excellent idea," she said, her tone businesslike. "Primary sources are always invaluable. I'm particularly interested in any journals or ledgers that might detail the construction phases or significant alterations." Their conversation flowed, ostensibly about the work ahead, but beneath the surface, a different current ran strong. Every glance, every shared moment of silence, was charged with the memory of his kiss, the promise of something nascent and powerful. Blackwood Manor, with its ancient stones and whispered secrets, felt less like a job site and more like a crucible, forging a connection between them that was both profound and exhilarating. The library was a magnificent cavern, a testament to centuries of accumulated knowledge and quiet contemplation. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, crafted from dark, gleaming mahogany, lined the walls, laden with volumes bound in leather, parchment, and even some in faded velvet. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper, dust, and a faint, sweet aroma of beeswax. Sunlight, filtered through tall, arched windows, painted stripes of gold across the dusty floorboards, illuminating motes dancing in the stillness. "This is extraordinary," Evelyn breathed, her historia's heart thrumming with excitement. She ran a gloved finger along a row of spines, her eyes wide with reverence. "A treasure trove." Rhys stood beside her, his presence warm and grounding. "It is," he agreed, his voice a low resonance in the vast space. "My ancestors were avid collectors. Some of these books haven't been touched in decades, perhaps even a century. They began their work, a quiet symphony of rustling pages, soft murmurs, and the occasional creak of the ancient floorboards." Evelyn focused on cataloguing the older sections, searching for anything that might pertain to the manor's construction or early inhabitants. Rhys, with his intimate knowledge of the house, helped her navigate the more obscure corners, occasionally reaching for a volume on a higher shelf, his muscles flexing beneath his shirt as he stretched. One such moment brought them tantalizingly close. Evelyn was struggling to reach a leather-bound folio, perched precariously on the highest shelf. "Just out of reach," she muttered, stretching on tiptoes. Rhys moved behind her, his breath warm on her neck. "Allow me," he murmured, his arm brushing her back as he reached past her. His proximity was sudden, electric. She felt the subtle shift of the air around her, the heat emanating from his body. As he retrieved the book, his hand brushed her arm, a fleeting, accidental touch that sent a jolt through her. She instinctively leaned into him, a soft gasp escaping her lips. He paused, the book held loosely in his hand, his body momentarily frozen in place. She could feel the subtle tension in his muscles, the rapid beat of her own heart echoing in her ears. He slowly turned, his eyes dark and intense meeting hers. The space between them, already small, seemed to contract further, filled with unspoken words and undeniable longing. The scent of him, that unique blend of earth and something wild, enveloped her, intoxicating her senses. "Evelyn," he breathed, his voice a low rumble, barely audible. His gaze dropped to her lips, and for a heart-stopping moment, she thought he would kiss her again. Her own lips parted slightly, an invitation. But then, a faint creak from the floorboards above. The house, it seemed, had its own timing. Broke the spell. Rhys blinked, the intensity in his eyes softening, though the underlying current remained. He cleared his throat and handed her the book. "Here you are," he said, his voice a little strained. Evelyn took the heavy volume, her fingers trembling slightly as they brushed his. "Thank you," she managed, her voice a whisper. She retreated slightly, her cheeks flushed, the warmth of his presence lingering like an afterimage. They continued their work, the unspoken tension a palpable third presence in the library. Evelyn found herself constantly aware of his movements, the sound of his breathing, the way the light caught the dark strands of his hair. She immersed herself in the musty pages, finding solace in the structure of historical research, yet her mind kept returning to that fleeting moment, that almost kiss. As the afternoon wore on, they stumbled upon a hidden compartment behind a loose panel in one of the bookshelves. It was a small, cleverly concealed space, and inside, nestled amongst yellowed silks, was a delicate, intricately carved wooden box. "What is this?" Evelyn asked, her voice hushed with awe, as Rhys carefully extracted it. He examined the box, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I've never seen this before," he admitted, his fingers tracing the delicate patterns. He pressed a hidden catch, and the lid sprang open with a soft clicking. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a collection of letters, tied with a brittle silk ribbon, and a single, exquisitely crafted silver locket. The letters, written in a flowing, elegant script, were addressed from a G to an E, and dated from the late 17th century. Evelyn carefully untied the ribbon, her fingers brushing against the ancient paper. "These look like personal letters," she whispered. Her historian's curiosity piqued. She began to read the first few lines, a gasp catching in her throat. Rhys, these are love letters, from a young man to a woman named Eleanor. Rhys leaned closer, his shoulder brushing hers, their heads almost touching as they both looked at the elegant script. Eleanor. She was a distant ancestor, a mistress of the house in the late 1600s, he murmured, his voice hushed. And that would be James, a stable hand, I believe. The letters unfolded a tale of forbidden love, passionate and desperate, between Eleanor, the lady of the manor, and James, a man far below her station. They spoke of stolen moments in the gardens, clandestine meetings in shadowed corridors, and a love that defied societal expectations. The language was rich, poetic, full of yearning and devotion. As Evelyn read aloud, her voice imbued with emotion, Rhys listened intently, his gaze fixed on the words, then on her. The story of Eleanor and James, their illicit passion, their yearning for a connection against all odds, seemed to mirror, in a haunting way, the unspoken tension that hummed between Evelyn and Rhys. The air grew thick with their shared discovery, and the echoes of a love that had once breathed life into these very walls. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the library floor. The light, once vibrant, softened into a warm, intimate glow. They had spent hours immersed in the letters, their shared concentration deepening the bond between them. Evelyn felt a profound connection to Eleanor's story, a resonance with the raw, untamed emotion that pulsed through the centuries. They never married, did they? Evelyn finally asked, her voice soft, as she carefully folded the last letter. Eleanor and James. Rhys shook his head, his gaze distant. No. Her family arranged a marriage for her with a man of suitable standing. James disappeared shortly after. It said Eleanor never truly recovered. She lived out her days here, a ghost of her former self. A pang of sadness pierced Evelyn's heart. A tragic love story, she murmured, carefully placing the letters back into the wooden box. She looked at the silver locket, intricate and beautiful, holding it in her palm. Do you think this belonged to Eleanor? Rhys took the locket from her, his fingers brushing hers again. Likely, perhaps a gift from James. He opened it, revealing two empty, tarnished spaces. No images, he mused. Just the promise of them. Their shared experience had peeled back another layer, exposing a vulnerability in both of them. The story of Eleanor and James, of a love that defied convention yet ultimately succumbed to circumstance, hung heavy in the air. It felt like a subtle warning, a silent question posed by the house itself. Would they dare to pursue their own burgeoning connection, or would they too be undone by the world around them? Time. As twilight deepened, painting the library windows in shades of violet and indigo, Evelyn and Rhys decided to call it a day. The revelations of the past few hours had left them both emotionally stirred. They carefully returned the wooden box to its hidden compartment, a silent pact made to respect the privacy of the long-dead lovers. They walked in comfortable silence to the drawing room, where Rhys had already laid a fire. The crackle and hiss of the flames were a welcome sound, chasing away the lingering chill of the old house. The room, usually grand and imposing, felt intimate and cozy in the flickering firelight, the shadows dancing on the ornate plasterwork. Rhys poured them each a glass of amber liquid. A fine single malt, Evelyn suspected, and handed one to her. Their fingers brushed, a spark of recognition passing between them. To Eleanor and James, Evelyn said softly, raising her glass. Rhys met her gaze, his eyes reflecting the firelight, a warmth radiating from their depths. To them, he echoed, his voice a low rumble. He took a sip, then settled into a deep armchair opposite her, his long legs stretched out towards the hearth. Evelyn curled up in her own chair, savoring the warmth of the fire and the smooth burn of the whiskey. The silence between them was different now, no longer heavy with unspoken tension, but rather comfortable, companionable. It was the silence of two people who had spent a day delving into history, shared a profound emotional experience, and now found themselves on the precipice of something new. It's a powerful story, Evelyn finally said, breaking the quiet. To love so deeply, to fight against so much, and to lose. Rhys gazed into the flames. Blackwood has seen its share of heartbreak, he mused, his voice laced with a quiet melancholy. And its share of joy, too, though sometimes the sorrow echoes louder. Do you believe in ghosts, Rhys? She asked, a genuine curiosity in her tone. He turned his head to look at her, a slow, thoughtful smile playing on his lips. I believe in lingering energy, he said. In emotions that impregnate the very fabric of a place. Love, despair, anger. They leave their mark. And sometimes, if you're quiet enough, you can still feel them, hear them. He paused, his gaze intensifying. Don't you? Evelyn felt a shiver trace its way down her spine, not of fear, but of profound understanding. I do, she admitted softly. The whispers, they aren't just the wind, are they? He shook his head. No, they're the house itself, breathing, remembering. He took another sip of his whiskey. My family has lived here for generations. Each one adds a layer to its story. I feel it in my bones sometimes, the weight of it all. It must be a tremendous responsibility, Evelyn said, her voice gentle. To be the custodian of so much history, so many lives. It is, he agreed, his eyes still holding hers. And sometimes, it can be a lonely one. The admission hung in the air, a vulnerable thread connecting them. Evelyn felt a surge of empathy, a sudden powerful desire to reach out, to offer comfort. She understood loneliness. Her life, though professionally fulfilling, had often felt solitary, focused on the past rather than the present. Do you ever regret it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Staying here, living this life? He considered her question for a long moment, the firelight casting dancing shadows on his strong features. No, he finally said, his voice firm, though tinged with a hint of wistfulness. Regret is too strong a word, it's my legacy, but there are moments when you wonder what else is out there, what you might be missing. He paused, his gaze softening, deepening. Before you came, I hadn't realized how much of the present I was missing, lost in the past. Her breath caught in her throat. The implication was clear, undeniable. She felt a blush creep up her neck, a delicious warmth spreading through her veins. He was telling her, without words, that Adieshe was the present, that she had awakened something in him too. And now? She prompted, her voice barely audible. Rhys leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped loosely. The intensity in his eyes was almost overwhelming, pulling her in, demanding her full attention. Now, he said, his voice dropping to a low, husky register. Now I feel alive, in a way I haven't felt in a very long time. He didn't explicitly say why she made him feel alive. But the unspoken truth hung between them, shimmering like heat haze. It was in the way his eyes devoured her, in the subtle curve of his lips, in the profound stillness that had fallen over the room. The air was thick with it, with the burgeoning desire, the tender vulnerability, the undeniable magnetic pull that had been building between them since the moment they first met. Evelyn found herself unable to speak, her throat tight with emotion. Her gaze was locked with his, a silent conversation passing between them that transcended words. The fire crackled, the house whispered its ancient secrets, and in the heart of Blackwood Manor, two souls stood on the precipice, teetering on the edge of a connection that promised to be as deep and timeless as the manor itself. The night was still young, and the possibilities, boundless and thrilling, stretched out before them. Julian's gaze, dark and intense, held hers. A silent question, a profound invitation. Evelyn felt her heart thrumming against her ribs, a wild bird trapped yet yearning for flight. The air between them crackled, charged with an unspoken understanding that bypassed the need for words. He took a slow, deliberate step towards her, and then another, closing the small distance that separated them. His hand, warm and strong, reached out, not to touch her directly, but to cup the side of her face, his thumb gently brushing the delicate skin beneath her eye. A shiver, not of cold but of pure sensation, traced a path down Evelyn's spine. Her breath hitched, and she leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed for a fleeting moment, savoring the exquisite contact. He smelled of old paper, a hint of cedar, and something uniquely masculine and compelling that drew her in. "Evelyn," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her, a sound that felt more like a caress than a word. "You are exquisite." Her eyes reopened, meeting his. There was no artifice in his gaze, only a raw, open desire that mirrored her own. She lifted her hand almost instinctively, to rest her palm against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her fingertips. The texture of his shirt, a fine linen, was surprisingly soft. "Julian," she managed, her voice a mere whisper, barely audible above the fire's soft roar. It was a plea, a question, a surrender all wrapped into one. He lowered his head, slowly, giving her ample time to pull away if she wished. But Evelyn had no such desire. She wanted this, had wanted it perhaps, since the first moment she'd laid eyes on him. Since the first time she'd felt the inexplicable pull towards Blackwood Manor and its enigmatic guardian. Her lips parted slightly in anticipation. His mouth, soft yet firm, finally met hers. It was not a sudden, demanding kiss, but a tender exploration, a gentle press that promised more. Her body responded instantly, a wave of warmth spreading through her veins. She felt herself melt into him, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt, clinging to him as if he were her anchor in a suddenly swirling world. The kiss deepened, slowly, exquisitely. His lips moved over hers with a practiced grace, coaxing a response she gave freely, eagerly. Her mind, usually so precise and analytical, emptied of everything but the overwhelming sensation of his mouth on hers, his scent filling her nostrils, the subtle taste of him. He shifted, his other hand moving to cup the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair, holding her captive in the most delicious way. Evelyn's initial shyness evaporated, replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated longing. She kissed him back with an intensity that surprised even herself, a hunger she hadn't known she possessed. Her tongue tentatively met his, and a soft moan escaped her throat, a sound that seemed to both startle and embolden him. He groaned in response, a deep, guttural sound that vibrated through her very bones, sending a fresh wave of heat through her. He broke the kiss, but only slightly, his forehead resting against hers, their breaths mingling. His eyes, dark pools of desire, stared into hers, searching, questioning. "Evelyn," he breathed again, his voice thick with emotion. This is more than I could have imagined." "And I," she whispered, her voice still shaky, her lips tingling from the kiss. She reached up, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw, feeling the slight stubble there. The intimacy of the moment was breathtaking, exhilarating. Julian took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, and led her from the study. The flickering firelight cast long dancing shadows on the walls as they moved through the silent house. Each creak of the floorboards, each whisper of the wind outside, seemed to amplify the profound intimacy of their shared journey. They ascended the grand staircase, its dark wood gleaming under the soft glow of the sconces. Evelyn felt a delicious sense of anticipation building within her, a thrilling awareness of where this path was leading. On the landing, he paused, turning to face her. The light from the moon, now peeking through a high-arched window, bathed them in a soft, silvery glow. His eyes devoured her, a slow, lingering appraisal that made her skin prickle with awareness. He reached out, his fingers gently tracing the line of her collarbone, then down the elegant curve of her neck, to the delicate lace of her dress. "This dress," he murmured, his voice husky, "is beautiful, but I have a feeling you are even more beautiful beneath it." A blush bloomed on Evelyn's cheeks, a warmth that spread through her entire being. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet utterly cherished under his gaze. Her heart pounded, a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She wanted him to prove his words, to peel away the layers, to uncover the woman hidden beneath the scholar. His fingers, with exquisite slowness, found the tiny buttons that ran down the back of her gown. Each unfastening was a delicious torment, a gentle tug that released the fabric, one by one. Evelyn stood still, her breath held captive in her chest, mesmerized by the delicate precision of his touch. The cool air brushed against her skin as the dress loosened, falling away from her shoulders, pooling at her feet in a silken whisper. She stepped out of it, leaving it a shimmering puddle on the antique rug. She stood before him in her chemise and petticoats, the fine lace and soft cotton a delicate barrier. The moonlight painted her form in shades of silver and shadow, highlighting the curves of her body. Julian's eyes never left her, a profound admiration shining in their depths. "Magnificent," he breathed, his voice barely audible. He reached out again, his hands resting on her bare shoulders, his thumbs gently stroking her skin. The warmth of his touch spread, chasing away any lingering chill. He then began to unbutton his own shirt, his movements unhurried, deliberate. Evelyn watched, her gaze fixed on his hands as they worked, revealing glimpses of his broad chest, the taut muscles of his arms. The shirt fell open, revealing a sculpted torso, dusted with dark hair that narrowed to a line towards his trousers. He was even more magnificent than she had imagined, a testament to strength and grace. Her fingers twitched with the urge to touch him, to feel the warmth of his skin against hers. He shed his shirt, tossing it carelessly onto a nearby chaise longue. His eyes, still locked with hers, held a fierce, tender light. "Come with me, Evelyn," he said, his voice a low invitation. He took her hand again, and led her down a dimly lit hallway, away from the main wing. The silence of the manor felt like a soft blanket, enveloping them, creating a private world. He stopped before a heavy oak door, pushing it open to reveal a room bathed in a soft, golden glow. A fire crackled merrily in a grand stone hearth, casting dancing shadows on the rich tapestry-covered walls. The air was warm, scented with lavender and old wood. This was his room. She knew it instinctively. A large four-poster bed, draped with heavy velvet curtains, dominated the space. A thick oriental rug lay on the polished floor, and a scattering of books lay on a bedside table, next to a half-empty glass of amber liquid. It was a sanctuary, masculine yet inviting, a reflection of the man himself. Julian led her to the bed, the soft mattress yielding beneath their weight as they sat on its edge. He turned to her, his gaze sweeping over her face, as if memorizing every detail. He reached out, his fingers gently tracing the delicate lace of her chemise, then slid them beneath the fabric, against the warm skin of her waist. Evelyn shivered, her breath catching in her throat. His touch was electric, a current that coursed through her, igniting dormant desires. She leaned into him, her hand finding his bare chest, her fingers exploring the firm planes of muscle, the warmth of his skin. The fine hairs tickled her palm, a new and thrilling sensation. "You're trembling," he whispered, his voice laced with concern, yet his eyes held a smoldering passion. "Anticipation," she confessed, her voice barely a breath. "And fear of something so beautiful, so overwhelming." He smiled, a slow, tender curve of his lips. "Fear not, my Evelyn. There is only beauty here, only truth." He leaned in, his lips brushing hers again, a soft, teasing dance. "Let me show you." With a gentle movement he lowered her onto the bed, following her down until he was hovering above her, his weight supported on his forearms. The soft light of the fire painted his sculpted features in hues of golden shadow. His eyes, dark and fathomless, searched hers, seeking permission, offering reassurance. Evan reached up, her hands cupping his face, drawing him closer. "Yes," she whispered, her voice firm despite the tremor in her heart. "Yes, Julian." His mouth descended, this time with a fervent intensity that stole her breath. The kiss was deep, consuming, a fiery expression of the longing that had simmered between them for weeks. Her hands tangled in his dark hair, pulling him closer still, wanting to feel every inch of him against her. He broke the kiss, moving to trail a path of soft, moist kisses down her jawline, along her throat, making her arch her neck, offering him more. Each touch, each kiss, sent shivers through her, awakening her body to sensations she had only ever read about in poetry. His fingers, deft and gentle, found the ribbons of her chemise, untying them with ease. The fabric parted, revealing the soft swell of her breasts. Evelyn felt a blush spread across her chest, a sudden vulnerability, but Julian's eyes held only adoration. He lowered his head, his warm breath ghosting over her skin before his lips found the delicate curve of her breast. A gasp escaped her as his mouth closed over her, a hot, wet suction that sent a jolt of pure pleasure directly to her core. Her back arched, her fingers digging into his shoulders as a wave of exquisite sensation washed over her. He suckled gently, then more firmly, teasing, tasting, driving her to the brink. Her body hummed with an unfamiliar, thrilling energy. She felt herself unfolding, opening, a flower blossoming under the warmth of the sun. He moved from one breast to the other, giving each equal attention, eliciting moans and soft cries from her. His hand drifted lower, over her ribs, across her belly, sending a trail of fire in its wake. She held her breath, anticipating his next move, her body alight with a desperate need. His fingers found the waistband of her petticoats, and with a practiced ease he slipped them down her legs, leaving her gloriously, completely bare beneath the soft covers. The air, though warm from the fire, felt cool against her newly exposed skin. She shivered, not from cold, but from the sheer intimacy of the moment. She looked at him, her eyes wide, vulnerable, and saw only tenderness and a fierce devotion in his. He shed his trousers and boxers with a swift movement, revealing the full extent of his desire. Evelyn's gaze widened, a mixture of awe and excitement. He was magnificent, a testament to raw masculine beauty, and he was hers for this night. He moved back over her, his body warm and firm against hers. The friction of their skin, the contrast of his rougher texture against her softness, was intoxicating. He kissed her again, a deep, soul-stirring kiss that promised communion. Her legs instinctively wrapped around his, drawing him closer, desperate to bridge the last remaining gap between them. "Julian," she breathed, her voice a plea, a silent urging. He understood. With a gentle thrust he entered her, slowly, carefully, allowing her body time to adjust, to accept him. Evelyn gasped, a sharp intake of breath as she felt the exquisite stretch, the profound fullness. It was an unfamiliar sensation, intense and overwhelming, yet utterly right. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, not of pain, but of the sheer emotional weight of the moment. He paused, holding himself still within her, his eyes searching hers for any sign of discomfort. "Are you all right, my love?" he whispered, his voice thick with concern. Evelyn nodded, tears now tracking paths down her temples. "More than all right," she managed, her voice choked with emotion. "Perfect." He began to move, slowly at first, a gentle rocking motion that built in intensity. Each thrust was a revelation, a deeper exploration of her own body, of their shared connection. She met his rhythm, her hips arching to meet his, her hands clutching his back, her nails digging into his skin, an unconscious expression of her mounting pleasure. The world outside the heavy velvet curtains of the bed faded away, leaving only the two of them, locked in this ancient, timeless dance. The fire crackled, a counterpoint to the rising tempo of their breathing, the soft moans that escaped their lips. Evelyn felt herself spiraling, rising higher and higher on a wave of pure sensation. Her body tightened around him, clenching, pulling him deeper still. "Julian!" she cried out, her voice raw as a torrent of pleasure ripped through her, shaking her to her very core. Her muscles contracted, her body convulsing around him, a release so profound it left her breathless, trembling. He groaned, a deep, visceral sound, and followed her over the edge, burying his face in the crook of her neck, his body shuddering with his own release. He collapsed onto her, his weight heavy but comforting, his breathing ragged against her ear. They lay there for a long time, entangled, breathless, the aftershocks of their shared climax still rippling through them. The scent of their passion mingled with the lavender and wood smoke, a potent, intoxicating perfume. Evelyn felt utterly spent, yet completely alive, a profound sense of peace settling over her. Julian stirred, lifting his head to gaze at her, his eyes soft with tenderness, and something more. A deep, abiding affection. He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips, a series of feather-light touches that spoke volumes. "My Evelyn," he murmured, his voice husky. "You are everything I never knew I was waiting for." She smiled, a soft, content smile. Her fingers idly traced the strong line of his back, feeling the dampness of his skin. "And you, Julian," she whispered, "have awakened something in me I didn't know existed." He shifted, pulling the heavy duvet over him, tucking her close against his side. His arm wrapped around her, holding her securely, possessively. Evelyn rested her head on his shoulder, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling utterly safe, utterly cherished. The fire in the hearth continued to burn, casting its warm glow over their intertwined forms, a silent witness to the profound connection forged in its flames. Sleep came easily, a deep, dreamless slumber born of exhaustion and profound contentment. Evelyn awoke slowly, feeling the warmth of Julian's body pressed against hers, the soft rhythm of his breathing a comforting lullaby. Sunlight, muted by the heavy curtains, filtered into the room, painting it in soft, ethereal hues. She stirred, stretching languidly, and felt the delicious ache in her muscles, a sweet reminder of the night's passion. She turned her head, her eyes opening to find Julian already awake, watching her, a gentle smile playing on his lips. "Good morning, sleepwalker," he whispered, his voice soft, intimate. "Good morning, Julian," she replied, her voice still thick with sleep. She leaned up, pressing a soft kiss to his lips. It was a morning kiss, tender and sweet, devoid of the frantic urgency of the night, yet filled with a deeper affection. He reached out, his fingers gently stroking a strand of hair from her face. "Did you sleep well?" "Like a dream," she confessed, her eyes shining. "The best sleep I've had in years." He pulled her closer, his arms tightening around her. "I confess, I spent a good portion of the morning simply watching you. You are even more beautiful in the soft light of dawn." Evelyn felt a blush rise to her cheeks again, a familiar warmth. She snuggled into him, reveling in the feel of his bare skin against hers. The silence that settled between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. After a while he kissed her hair, then her temple. "I should probably make coffee. Or something equally mundane." She chuckled, a soft, melodic sound. Mundane is good after a night like that. But neither of them moved. The lure of the warm bed, of each other's presence, was too strong. His hand began to trace lazy patterns on her back, sending shivers through her. Her own hand found his chest, her fingers playing with the dark hair there. The embers of passion, though momentarily banked, began to stir once more. His lips found the sensitive skin behind her ear, then trailed down her neck. "Perhaps," he murmured, his voice a low rumble, "mundane can wait." Evelyn turned in his arms, her eyes meeting his, a playful challenge in their depths. "Perhaps it can." The morning unfolded in a languid, sensual dance. Their second time together was slower, more tender, an exploration of newfound intimacy. They moved with a comfortable ease, each touch, each kiss, a reaffirmation of the profound connection they had forged. It was a testament to the fact that their passion wasn't just a fleeting spark, but a deep, burning flame that promised to endure. Later, much later, they finally emerged from the bedroom, wrapped in thick robes Julian had found in his wardrobe. Evelyn felt light, almost buoyant, as they descended the grand staircase, the manor now bathed in bright morning light. The scent of coffee and freshly baked bread wafted from the kitchen, a welcome aroma after their delicious exertions. As they sat at the large polished dining table, the sun streaming through the leaded glass windows, Evelyn felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced in years. Julian watched her over the rim of his coffee cup, a quiet contentment in his eyes. "Evelyn," he said, his voice soft. "What happened last night? It was not just a fleeting moment, was it?" She met his gaze, her heart full. "No, Julian. It was everything. It felt like the beginning of something truly extraordinary." He reached across the table, taking her hand in his thumbs stroking the back of her fingers. "I feel it too. This manor, it has been a keeper of secrets, a place of solitude for me. But with you it feels alive again, like a home, truly a home." Evelyn squeezed his hand. "And I, Julian, feel like I've finally found where I belong. Not just in the archives, but here, with you." The possibilities, once boundless and thrilling in the deep of night, now felt concrete and real in the bright light of morning. The ancient secrets of Blackwood Manor, once whispered only to the shadows, now held the promise of a shared future, a new chapter in its long-storied history. The manor had found its new mistress, and Julian had found his soulmate, an unexpected treasure unearthed in the dusty archives of his own heart. Their story, like the manor itself, was just beginning, rich with the promise of passion, discovery, and a love as deep and timeless as Blackwood Manor itself.